Welcome to our third video comparing the best Dyson batteries from Amazon. Today we're going to look at the quote-unquote best replacement battery pack for the Dyson V10 that's available on Amazon at the time of this recording. As always, if anything changes regarding availability or an updated recommendation, I'll add that later on in the notes. Please note, I purchased all these batteries with my own money. I have not been paid by any party to complete this video, and I'm not currently an Amazon affiliate. First, a couple caveats to discuss with regard to the testing methodology. We only test the batteries on high power. Why? Because it stresses the battery cells the most. A short run on high will mean the cells that are underrated for this machine will either get too hot or run out of voltage. Second, just like the Dyson V8 batteries that we've looked at in the past, these are temperature regulated, meaning they'll shut off when they reach around 130 degrees exterior temperature regardless of how much power is left. The more stressed the cell is, the more heat it will produce, which will result in a lower runtime, with the limitation being heat generated, not the voltage. Third, the Dyson V10 uses a 525 watt motor running 25.2 volts. The 525 divided by 25.2 is 21 amps. So we're looking for the battery with cells that can safely and reliably handle 21 amps of continuous discharge. The best battery will be able to run the longest with the most stable temperature while using quality cells. First, let's take a look at the OEM battery. This one's about 1 year old, and as we've shown in the past, it's constructed with Sony Murata VTC6 21700 cells. Check out our own battery teardown playlist for more. 21700 refers to the form factor, meaning that these are 21mm wide and 70mm tall. These are great cells which are readily capable of 30 plus amps of discharge, so they're perfectly applied to this situation. During our test run with the OEM battery, we found that while on high, the battery lasts for about 5 minutes 12 seconds and reaches a temperature of 125 degrees Fahrenheit. Although this is not a brand new battery, this will serve as our benchmark. Dyson finally has new V10 batteries back in stock after being out of stock for most of 2020 and 2021. These will set you back $130, but they're guaranteed to fit and they will be built with quality cells. For replacements, let's first look at the Doweor, which claims to have a capacity of 3.8 amp hours. At the time of purchase, this battery costs $59.69. The Doweor ran a total of 4 minutes 50 seconds and reached a temperature of 135 degrees Fahrenheit. Because this runs warmer and lasts a shorter amount of time than the OEM, I suspect this is using 18650 cells rather than 21700s. So what's the difference? 18650 batteries are cheaper, more common, have less capacity, and can withstand smaller amperages than 21700s. Sure enough, the Doweor is running 18650s. In this case, it has the PROS 18650 cells. These are no-name bulk Chinese cells, and it's very difficult to find documentation on these. The white paper I did find related to this cell indicated it is 2.1 amp hours with a maximum discharge rate of 5C. To calculate the C rating into amperage, we take the 5C and multiply it by the milliamp hours, divide by 1000, and that gives us our amperage. In this case, 10.5 amps. This is below the necessary 20 amps needed by the motor. So what does this mean? It means that these will not last as long as higher discharge cells. The heat and strain will likely also cause the cells to fail prematurely. We can also see that the manufacturer lied about the pack's capacity at 3.8 amp hours, while in fact they test at 2.1 amp hours. Next up, we'll look at the Flylink 4.0 amp hour, which is such a weird name. This pack was the most expensive in our test at $80.99 at the time of purchase. However, the performance did not match the price as it ran 5 minutes 20 seconds, just 8 seconds longer than the OEM, with max temperature reaching 130 degrees Fahrenheit. When disassembled, we do see that this pack is using Molicel P26A cells. These are great cells from a reputable manufacturer, although they are only 18650s. However, for 18650s, these perform well. These are rated to 35 amps for momentary spikes and 25 amps for continuous discharge, putting them well within the safety area for the V10's 21 amps. That being said, there are some negatives. First is the highest as tested price. The second is using 18650s instead of 21700s. And the third is lying about the capacity. Flylink claims these are 4.0 amp hours when in reality they are 2.6 amp hour packs. With these factors, it would be better just to end up with the OEM battery. Third, we have the Energup 4.5 amp hour. At the time of purchase, this battery ran a middle of the pack $66.89. On high, the battery only ran for 3 minutes and 48 seconds with a max temp of 130 degrees Fahrenheit. This is by far the shortest in our test, but the second highest price tag. Upon dissection, we can see that the pack uses an EVE 25P cell in an 18650 form factor. Again, the manufacturer is trying to cheap out by not using the proper 21700s. This is a well-documented Chinese manufacturer of cells, and these are rated at 30 amp spike discharge, but more like 25 amps for continuous discharge. The capacity of these cells is 2.5 amp hours. So why the short runtime if they're rated so well? It could be a number of factors, not the least of which are the cells themselves. They could either be counterfeit, or more than likely, they're binned low-grade cells. So what does this mean? When a manufacturer makes cells, they test each one for quality and variations in output. A quote-unquote A-tier battery goes to brand name companies making batteries for power tools, cell phone chargers, electric cars, etc. However, lower bin cells with variations in capacity, voltage sag, or cosmetic problems are put in lower bins and then sold at a discount to less reputable manufacturers. That may be the case here. In any case, the questionable runtime and relatively high cost, coupled with lying about the total capacity of the battery being 4.5 amp hours when they're really just 2.5 amp hours, means the Energup should be a pass. Now for our final battery pack. The Tenhutt 3.0 amp hour tested well in our V8 battery competition, so I decided to bring the brand back here. At the time of purchase, this was the cheapest in our test at $48.99. You'll notice that the Tenhutt is larger than all the other battery packs by a fair margin. Does this mean we have 21700s? For testing, the Tenhutt clocked in at a whopping 7 minutes 39 seconds, beating everything else in the competition by a wide margin. The temperature was an unconcerning 133 degrees Fahrenheit. We also see, could it be 21700s? It is! This has a SunPower 21700-3000 cells coming in at 3.0 amp hours. Tracking down information on these cells was a little difficult. Although they're pretty ubiquitous in off-brand Chinese products, SunPower never has much documentation available. The one place where I could find specs was Alibaba. Here they're listed as having a max pulse discharge of 50 amps, which seems a little high, but a very believable constant discharge rating of 30 amps, which is within specs of the V10 and very believable for a 21700 form factor cell. So who won? Before we get into that, if you found this video helpful at all, I'd appreciate a beep boop of that like button. Thanks! Well, first I'll say that if you want the ultimate in safety and security, you should go with the OEM battery. Although expensive, they give you consistent and safe results. I am not an electrical engineer, so everything I say here should be taken with a grain of salt. However, based upon our testing, I'm going to recommend the Tenhutt 3.0 amp hour battery. First, it's the only battery to actually use 21700 cells, and it has a runtime to prove it. Although they're Chinese minor brand cells, their specs show that they will not be overly stressed in this machine and should last a while in most circumstances. Second, this was the cheapest battery in the test with the longest runtime. You can't beat that for value, especially given the build quality. And finally, the company truthfully rated their battery packs as 3.0 amp hours. That has likely cost them sales to competitors with overinflated numbers, but the honesty in a segment filled with scoundrels is refreshing. So what are your thoughts? Are you going to get the Tenhutt or the OEM? Let us know down below, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.